Friday, the Bureau of Statistics released Nigeria's latest foreign trade in goods statistics. Exports, total trade continues to rise, 38 trillion there. You can see exports 22 trillion, imports 15, subtract 15 from 22, trade balance at 7.4. It's about 5.8 in the first quarter of the year. And of course, looking at the summary, same story, crude oil continues to dominate the exports for Nigeria. You can see non-crude there, 10 trillion, crude at 11.9, non-oil at 3.4. And non-oil is where we are going to be focusing today with our discussion, particularly agriculture and the Shea Nut Export Ban that the federal government of Nigeria has put in place for the next 6 months. The Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise has put out a note on that particular ban, and we are very happy to have Dr. Muda Yusuf, who of course is the Chief Executive Officer for the Center for the Promotion of Private. Yeah, we summarized some of the points there, and he's going to flesh out the points that you're seeing on your screen there in that note that was put out. Dr. Yusuf, it's great to have you.
Thank you, Rutus.
Thank you so much for joining us. So I want to kick off. You did point out in the note there that the instantaneous nature of the ban is going to be disruptive. Can you flesh that out for us?
Well, the point that is being made there is that in any policy process, particularly when we are undertaking a major policy change, what investors want to see is a kind of engagement, not necessarily to stop the policy, but to ensure that there is a seamless transition. Because, you have a lot of things going on in the investment space. You're already grappling with a lot of risk in the investment environment. And we don't want to compound the risk by increasing the level of uncertainty.
Right, okay.
So that is why we are concerned about this, and even any other policy for that matter. Engagement is very, very critical in the policy process.
Yeah.
Timelines should be agreed on. How the stakeholders will be onboarded into the new policy regime should be agreed on. So that is the basic principle. It's about public-private dialogue.
Right.
It's a very, very critical component of any policy process.
Okay.
So that we don't have situations where you have a shock that can knock out your business completely. That is what has happened in this instance. We had something similar when we had the border closure under Buhari regime.
Yep.
Just suddenly like that, so many, up to today, there are businesses that have not recovered.
And inflation took off.
Retaliatory activities from neighboring countries and so on and so forth. We don't want a repeat of that.
Yeah.
So that is why, yes, it is noble. Yes, it is good to add value. But there is a process to ensure that the value addition in itself is also sustainable. That is very, very critical. And in order to ensure the quality of a policy regime, engagement is key.
Yeah.
Those who are policymakers don't have as much insight into the business environment as those who are operators in the business. So that is why there has to be that handshake between policymakers and investors and the engagement of all stakeholders. Of course, you can see that there's a conflict between the interests of the processors and the interests of those who are in the primary production.
We have them all this week.
Yes, but it is the responsibility of government to find a middle ground to ensure that you don't penalize one to benefit the other. So that is the spirit.
Now, well said. In fact, excellent points you've made there. What do you make of the fact that other countries have done this? So, Togo, Ghana, Burkina Faso, Mali, they've also put in these bans. And so there's the argument that, Nigeria is aligning with this regional West African bloc to ban the export.
First of all, we need to interrogate the sustainability of their own plan.
Yeah.
Because from what I've heard, a lot of smuggling is taking place outside of those countries to other neighboring countries so that people can export their products.
Yeah.
Then there's also the issue of the competitiveness of what we're even producing.
Right.
Because you don't add value just for the sake of adding value. You add value so that out there, you can also be competitive. And what are the other variables that are driving competitiveness? Have you addressed those issues? Have you addressed the structural issues? Have you addressed the logistics issues? Have you addressed the financing issues? These are very critical issues. It's not just only about raw materials. So the approach has to be holistic. The fact that they are doing it in Togo does not mean that it should happen same way. And even in those places, I don't think that the ban was as instantaneous as we have had here. They gave them some timeline to say that, okay, we are going to do this in 6 months, in 1 year time, so that even those who are aggregators, even those who are exporters, can be encouraged to even set up processing plants. So that they, even at their own level, they can begin to invest.
Yeah.
We have seen such transitions in other sectors. We saw it in cement when we were importing massively, and there was a program to transition from importation to production. And today we are self-sufficient. You know?
Gotcha.
So these are the things that it's a question of strategy, and it's a question of adopting an inclusive approach to the policy process.
Okay, speaking of strategy, your notes called for a phased approach. So I guess, can you talk about that? Are you saying that just, there should be, talk about that. Is it timelines and...
The phased approach is about timeline.
Okay.
And the timeline has to agree in conjunction with all the critical stakeholders in the sector.
Yeah.
I'm sure the president or the policymakers are not interested in disrupting people's businesses. They are not happy to see people lose money in investment. I mean, if there is anything that this current reform has brought about in terms of the critical benefits, it is the positive impact on non-oil exports.
Right.
I mean, you just showed the figures about our trade surplus.
Yeah.
First quarter, we did over $3 billion.
Yeah.
And it's improving. And one of the benefits of a weak currency is the incentive it provides for exports.
Yeah. Your exports are more affordable.
They are more affordable.
Yeah.
And that is why those who are in the non-export business, there's a lot of traction. There's a lot of momentum. We don't want to slow down that momentum. It is good to add value, but we need to do it in a way. So when I talk about, phased implementation, it's about agreeing timeline, agreeing milestones, agree on what we need to put in place so that we achieve the outcomes. Because again, you don't add value just for the sake of adding value.
Right. You
add value to the point that you are also competitive. And you add value to the point that you are not looking for subsidized raw materials. Because what has happened in this instance is that the primary producers are being compelled to subsidize the processors. Because when you don't allow people to enjoy what the market price is, it's a suppression. You are creating a subsidy regime for those who are buying it off them. When price crashed by 30%, it's a subsidy for the processors. So within the framework of equity, we cannot be getting the primary producers, the farmers, the agricultors, to now be subsidizing the processors. That is not equitable. So we need an equitable policy framework where there's a win-win for everybody. That is the whole idea.
It's been said that some critics of this decision have said 6 months is not even enough to do anything. What do you make of this initial, what do you make of this initial 6 month timeline?
What I learned is that 6 months in the first instance.
Yeah.
So, which means that it may even be further extended. But again, the point about production and business competitiveness is about addressing the fundamentals. What happened to the cocoa processing plants? How well are they doing?
Yeah, that's a good question, right?
Why are they not doing well? Has somebody investigated that to see what are the fundamental issues? It is good to talk about these things, but we need to address the fundamentals so that we don't jump into it and discover that you need to hold some people down so that other people can progress.
Yeah.
Everybody has to be in it together, and everybody has to benefit together. That is the kind of model. So 6 months, I don't think 6 months can fix all these problems. But what is more important is to address the competitiveness issues, which is beyond just getting the cheap raw materials.
Yeah.
I talked about the structural issues. I talked about the financing issues.
Yeah.
I talked about the logistics issues. These are things, even some of the issues of packaging and all of that, standards. Because when you are getting to the international market,
standards are high.
Standards is an issue.
Yeah.
Competitiveness in price, competitiveness in quality. Those things matter. So it's not as easy as just ban this so that these people can produce. No, I think we need to have a balanced approach, and have an appropriate timeline to ensure that the right outcomes are achieved.
Fantastic. Now, I want to still talk about food generally, but I want to move to inflation. And thank you so much for your thoughts on this, Shea. But this conversation is really going to extend for a while. But we're expecting inflation from the Bureau of Statistics later today, usually releasing on the 15th of every month. Inflation has been decelerating. Okay, so there's the chart. But I want to get your thoughts. I know, of course, there was the rebasing that happened around January. But how have you been looking at in the prices of goods and services and how inflation has been, I guess, slowing since about April to
No, I think it's a very good development.
Yeah.
It's a very good trend. And it's also a reflection of the fact that the economy is also gradually recovering from the shocks of those reforms. It's also an indication of the fact that the macroeconomic environment is stabilizing. So those are positive signs as far as inflation is concerned. But again, we need to worry about some segments of the population and some segments of products as far as inflation is concerned. Yes, at the headline, inflation is good, but there's still a lot of concern around food inflation.
Fantastic. So
which is a major issue.
Yes,
and when we talk about welfare, when people complain that the reform is too hard, there's a lot of hardship, to a large extent, it's about food. So we need to step out of just the normal policy regime to see what extra things we can do about the food situation. And that is why I like the idea, because the president too has been doing a lot. There is this presidential committee on food security. They have been trying to do a lot of things. They imported tractors, 2,000 tractors.
Right.
And again, strangely, this is again about policy implementation. Tractors were imported almost over 2 months ago. Up till now, the tractors are yet to be distributed. So we need to close this gap. And this is where the bureaucracy also comes in. When there's an urgent matter to be addressed, all this idea of being bureaucratic in the way policies are implemented needs to be addressed. I mean, how do we explain a situation you have tractors? The president unveiled it, 2 months ago, or even over 2 months ago. And yet the tractors are still sitting down there. They're still working on modalities on how to distribute. So those things also, they are very important. And also more importantly, is the cost of inputs. Many of the inputs are very expensive because they are imported. Import content is very high. And because of the exchange rate situation, things like fertilizer, insecticide, pesticides, herbicides, even improved seedling and things like that. Those things that can improve yield, their costs are very high. And this brings us to the point of subsidy. We cannot run away from subsidizing agriculture. I know subsidy is difficult to manage in our environment.
But we cannot. Abused.
Yes, because of the abuse. But we cannot subject the agricultural sector purely to market principles.
Very interesting point there.
There has to be some intervention. I think, and this is not just at the federal level, it's at the federal level and at the state level. All hands must be on deck to address this issue of food insecurity.
Perfect. And President Tinubu has declared a state of emergency for food. He's also called for lower prices. But the producers of food are pushing back, saying, look, Mr. President, we need and you've mentioned input costs, the cost of the factors of production to come down for you to see the reduction that you want to see in food prices. Where is electricity and good roads and those other factors in there when you look at what we need to bring these things down?
Those things are very critical. But again, I go back to subsidy. You cannot fix logistics very fast. It takes time to fix that. But when it comes to the cost of importing some of it, I'm not talking about subsidizing foreign exchange. But there's a lot that can be done in the area of financing for agriculture along the entire chain. Because you cannot invest in agriculture and be borrowing at 30%. Not even in any business, but it's even more so in agriculture. Funding is very critical. Then the tariffs, and I'm aware that most of the tariffs have been removed, but we need to also follow that through. That import tariffs on anything that has to do with inputs into agriculture should be completely removed. Whether import duty, whether VAT, any form of charges or levy should be completely removed. And on top of that, if there is any way the government can subsidize those inputs, seedlings, agrochemicals, fertilizers, governments between the federal and the state, there has to be some subsidy. That is the way it is done all over the world in order to ensure food security.
But because of our, again, you've already said it, I'm just repeating you now, because of our history of how subsidies have been abused in the past, look at fuel and so on, what is the effort that needs to be made to make sure it's not abused for the food inputs? I mean,
well, it's an institutional thing. And if you are really committed to it, I think we can get maybe a framework of public-private partnership to ensure that these things are delivered as promised by the government, so that the benefits of the subsidy gets to the real people. That is one. Secondly, if the supply is adequate, the risk of corruption will be less. The risk of hoarding and all these things will be less. It is when there's a big gap between the demand and the supply, and there is scarcity, then people take advantage of the scarcity to play games, just as you have seen with the fertilizer. But if the supply is adequate and sufficiently supported, I think we will get some results. I think it's something that we can fix. But what is more important is that we're in a market economy, but we cannot subject agriculture to a market economic framework.
Got you.
It cannot, it doesn't work.
You know, I just thought of something. I know you've been following, this is a business show, but politics seeps into this. We're going into 2026, there's an election in 2027. You know, normally analysts, CEOs, you know, like yourself, they do get worried that the closer you get to an election, the less government focus there is on reforms. Do you worry that as we enter into 2026 and get closer to the 20, that all these directives and advice that the CPP is giving could somehow fall to the wayside as we get closer?
Well, that risk is there. That risk is there. But what is important is that there are some reforms, once they get ingrained or get entrenched into the system,
and they seep through,
they will continue irrespective of what is happening in the political space. And there are some institutions that have proven to be, you know, very technically competent, like the central bank, for instance. I don't see much distraction as far as the central bank is concerned. Well, a bit of worry around the fiscal space because of all this election spending and all of that. The risk is there. But if there is that intentionality to ensure that key programs, key reforms are not derailed, and in order to also ensure that we have minimum distraction on policy, of course, we will not have much to worry about as far as these things are concerned. My
final question to you, you mentioned earlier about the financing for agriculture, and you mentioned, you know, borrowing at 30%. How do you expect businesses to move forward? I'm going to take you back to the MPC and inflation. If you know, there's been a lot of talk about how, you know, some folks feel that the CBN should, monetary policy should come down since inflation is decelerating, but Governor Olayemi Cardoso keeps saying, look, I want to look at the data, and I think they just want to take a data approach. Do you think we could possibly get a reduction in the MPR if inflation continues to move?
I think so. I think so. If only for signaling. That means that it may not be a very significant reduction. But we need to signal that things are getting better, because MPR is 27.5. Inflation is about
22.
22. I mean, MPR is far higher than inflation, which is also an anomaly of sorts, you know. So all of this point to the fact that at least we should begin to see some easing in the monetary policy space. I think that is my expectation.
Dr. Muda Yusuf, it is always a pleasure having
you.
you on the show to talk about these economic issues.
Thank
I think
you
you were also on Dr. Abati's
Yes,
so you are in high demand in economic circles to talk about this. The CEO of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, Dr. Muda Yusuf, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.